Once upon a time, lived the most feared mafia boss in the city. Every woman his family paraded before him wanted his empire, money, and his name. So he did the one thing no one expected. He vanished into the city as a poor man with nothing but a guitar. What he didn't expect was a girl too broken by her own family to know she'd just fallen in love with a king in disguise. When the truth finally came out, the people who belittle her for marrying a nobody would be the ones on their knees. The mansion was silent except for the sound of heels against marble, one pair after another. Crossing the floor display, Min-jae sat with his arms folded and face unreadable. Across from him stood a woman in a pale blue dress smiling. "My king," she said.
My king, I've heard so much about you. Your family's holdings in the shipping industry alone are remarkable.
Min-jae answered right away. "Is that what you came here for?" he asked. "My family's holdings." Of course not, I only meant." "You may go," he said, a strict order. She left without another word, heels clicking a fast retreat. His mother sat near him, watching the exchange with tired patience. She had watched this same scene play out more times than she could count this year. "Min-jae."
That is the 20th woman you have turned away.
20th, he repeated. "And not one of them looked at me the way you look at someone you actually want to know. Honestly, this selection is totally boring, Mom." His father set his teacup down with a controlled clink. "You are the head of this family's future, Min-jae. This empire does not run itself, and it will not run without an heir to carry it forward. You cannot postpone this forever." "I'm not postponing it," Min-jae said. "I'm refusing to marry a woman who wants the empire more than she wants me." "They all know who you are," his mother said gently. "That is simply the reality of who you have become. You cannot expect a woman in this city not to know the name." Min-jae stood, walking toward the tall windows that overlooked the estate gates, beyond which the city stretched out, indifferent and alive. "Then I'll find a woman who doesn't know what she's looking at." His father frowned. "And how exactly do you intend to do that?" Min-jae didn't turn around. The city. Not these arranged rooms full of women reciting my net worth back to me like a resume. The city, where no one looks at me and sees an empire. His mother almost laughed, though there was no humor in it. "You intend to disappear into the streets? You are the most recognized man in this city's underworld, Min-jae. Someone will know you." "Not if I don't look like myself," he said quietly, "and sound like myself. Carry nothing that says who I am." None of his parents spoke. They already know that once their son's mind is made, arguing only wasted breath. 4 days later, in a small room at the back of the estate that no one but he used anymore, Min-jae stood in front of a mirror, wearing clothes his tailor would have wept to see him in. A faded jacket, worn at the elbows, boots scuffed from years in a closet, nothing pressed, or whispered money the way every other item in his wardrobe did. He reached for the guitar leaning against the wall, an old one. He'd learned to play as a boy, before bodyguards, and his name meant danger to people who had never even met him. He hadn't touched it in years, though. He slung it over his shoulder and looked at himself one more time. For a moment, the reflection staring back wasn't the boss of anything but just a man. The walk from the estate gates to the city center took longer on foot than it ever had in the back of a car with tinted windows. Min-jae noticed things he'd never had reason to notice before: the smell of street food carts, the sound of buses braking too hard, the way people moved past each other without stepping aside or lowering their eyes, and no careful deference his presence usually demanded. No one turned to look at him, nor straightened their posture. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Min-jae walked through the city as a stranger in it, and it felt, strangely, like breathing. He had no idea that 2 streets away, a woman named Mary was walking out of a shopping mall with her arms full of bags, about to have the worst moment of her week become the reason his entire plan would change. Mary balanced several shopping bags against her hip as she pushed through the mall's glass doors, the afternoon sun hitting her face after hours spent indoors picking out gifts for a family gathering that, if she was honest with herself, she wasn't looking forward to. She hadn't made it more than 10 steps down the sidewalk before a voice she knew too well cut through the noise of the street. Well, Look who's still shopping like she has somewhere important to be. Mary stopped, her stomach tightening the way it always did at the sound of her stepsister's voice. Ivana, she turned to find her standing there, arm looped through her husband's, a designer bag hanging from her wrist that likely cost more than everything Mary had just purchased combined. I was just leaving, Mary said, keeping her voice even, trying to walk past without making eye contact. Her stepsister, Ivana, stepped directly into her path. Still trying so hard, aren't you? Still trying to look like you belong somewhere you clearly don't. Please, Mary said quietly. I don't want any trouble. You never do. Her stepsister's smile turned sharp. You just want everyone to feel sorry for you, right? Poor, unmarried Mary. Wasted effort, that's what Mother calls you, you know. A wasted effort. Mary's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Silence had always been safer. Her stepsister's husband chuckled beside her, clearly enjoying the show, doing nothing to stop it. And then, without warning, her stepsister's hand shot out and struck the bags from Mary's arms. They hit the pavement hard, spilling their contents across the concrete, folded fabric, a small wrapped box, tumbling out into the open where anyone passing could see. Oops, her stepsister said, not even bothering to sound sincere. She looked at her husband, and the two of them laughed, walking past Mary and through the mall doors without a second glance, as if she wasn't even worth the trouble of watching her pick everything back up. Mary knelt down on the sidewalk, cheeks burning, gathering her things with shaking hands, doing her best to ignore the stares of strangers passing by.
It's all right, let me help you.
The voice was calm, unfamiliar, and close. Mary looked up to find a man crouched beside her, already gathering the fallen items, a folded shirt, the small box, a bag that had torn slightly at the seam. He wore a worn jacket and had a guitar slung across his back, and there was nothing in his posture that suggested he was in any hurry to be anywhere else. You don't have to do that, Mary said, feeling embarrassed. I know. He said simply, handing her the shirt. I saw what happened. I'm sorry that happened to you. No one deserves that, especially not on a normal afternoon. Mary didn't know what to say. No one had ever apologized on her behalf before, not for something that wasn't even their fault. He handed her the last of her things and stood, offering a hand to help her up, which she took hesitantly. He held her gaze a beat longer than a stranger usually would. Do you mind, he said, if I try to put a little smile on your face? It's the least I can do after watching that. Before she could answer, he had already turned and walked toward a shaded bench across the street, guitar sliding into his hands as he sat. Mary stood there a moment unsure, and then, for reasons she couldn't fully explain to herself, she followed. He didn't ask her questions, he simply played. Mary sat beside him, enjoying the melody, and despite everything, she smiled. There it is, he said, glancing at her sideways. You didn't have to do any of this, she said again, quieter this time. No, he agreed. I wanted to. Thank you, Mary said to him, for making my afternoon better than earlier. She went home that afternoon and said nothing to anyone about what had happened. Not even the shove from her step-sis, which was ordinary enough that it barely registered as news in her household. The next afternoon, she found an excuse to walk that same street again. She told herself she was only curious whether he'd still be there, and fortunately he was. You came back, he said, not looking up from tuning a string. I wanted to hear you play again, she admitted, sitting down beside him without needing to be invited this time. Days turned into a routine neither of them spoke aloud. Mary would find any excuse, an errand, a walk, a reason that sounded believable even to herself, to pass that bench. And he was always there, guitar resting against his knee, waiting without seeming to wait. They talked about small things at first, her favorite season and a song he half remembered from childhood. The kind of things that didn't matter enormously, because for the first time in a long time, someone was actually listening to her answer. What's it like? She asked one afternoon, not having anywhere you have to be. He considered the question longer than she expected. Freeing, he said finally, and lonely some days, I think most things worth having come with both. She didn't ask what he meant by that, but something in his voice told her he understood loneliness the way she did, different circumstances, same ache. One evening, as the light dropped low and orange over the street, he grew quieter than usual, his hands still on the guitar but not playing. "I'm not sure I'm in your class," he said finally. "You come from a wealthy family, Mary. I have this guitar, this jacket, and not much else to my name." Mary looked at him for a long moment before answering. "You've given me more smile and peace in these weeks than that house has given me in years." He didn't respond right away, but something in the way he looked at her told her the words had landed somewhere deep. Weeks passed this way, quiet afternoons, small conversations, a kind of peace Mary hadn't known she was starving for until she found it on a shaded bench with a man who owned nothing, but made her feel like she'd found everything. One evening, as the street emptied around them, Mary said to him, "I want us to spend our lives together." Min-jae turned to her and took her hand, carefully, like he was asking permission with the gesture itself. "Mary," he said, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think before you answer." "Okay," she said, her heart already picking up. "Do you truly want to spend your life with me? Not because it's easy or comfortable, because I have nothing to offer you but myself." She didn't hesitate, not even for a second. "Yes," she said, "I do." The living room had never felt so cold, despite the warmth of the chandelier overhead. Mary stood beside Min-jae, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, as her father rose slowly from his seat, disbelief carving deep lines into his face. "This," her father said, voice low and dangerous, "is the man you've chosen, a guitar player with nothing to his name." Her stepsister, Ivana, sat back on the sofa, arms crossed, and Mary could see the smile creeping onto her face, not shock. This was exactly the kind of disaster she has been hoping for. "How could you bring this shame into our home?" her stepmother snapped, rising to stand beside her husband, a united front against the intrusion Mary had brought through the door. "After everything this family has built, this is what you choose to bring back to us." "He makes me happy," Mary said, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "Happy," her stepmother repeated, as if the word itself were an insult. "Happy does not pay for anything, Mary. Happy does not maintain a family name." Her father's voice cut through the room, final and unshakable. "If you marry this worthless man, you leave this house with nothing. No inheritance, and all your accounts funded by this family would be seized." The room went silent, waiting to see if she would break. Min-jae leaned close, his voice barely above a whisper meant only for her. "Are you sure about this, Mary? Losing everything, the house, your share inheritance, all of it, just to marry a poor man like me?" Mary lifted her chin and spoke loud enough for the whole room to hear this time. "I have nothing," she said, "but the peace I've found with him is worth more than anything this house has ever given me. We'll work hard and earn what we need. Together, that's enough for me." Something shifted behind Min-jae's eyes in that moment. Quiet, unspoken, but real, the look of a man who had just heard something he had spent years waiting to hear. Her stepsister's laugh broke the silence. "Enjoy your poverty, Mary. I'll be sure to visit." They married with no wealth behind them, nothing but the conviction they'd built on that bench over weeks that had felt like a lifetime. Min-jae brought Mary to his small apartment in the city, modest, worn at the edges, nothing like the marble halls she'd grown up walking through. The furniture was simple, and the walls were bare. But there was a quiet in it that Mary had never felt in her father's house, no matter how large the rooms were. Word spread through their circle quickly, the way gossip always did among people with too much time and too little kindness. How could a daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the city throw everything away for a man with nothing? Neighbors whispered when she passed. Distant relatives shook their heads at family gatherings, offering pity disguised as concern. Mary never once looked back. Every morning she woke up beside a man who looked at her like she was the finest thing he'd ever been given, and every morning. Months later was the Easter family gathering. The family home was dressed for the holiday, garlands along the staircase, gifts stacked high near the door, the smell of a feast drifting from the kitchen. As daughters of the family, tradition demanded they return each year, gifts in hand, to honor their parents. Her stepsister arrived first, sweeping through the door on her husband's arm, both of them carrying armfuls of gifts wrapped in gold ribbon that caught the light. "For mother and father," she announced with a flourish, setting the boxes down like an offering at an altar. "Only the finest, of course, nothing less would do." Her mother's face lit up with pride as she admired each box. When Mary and Min-jae arrived shortly after, their gift was small by comparison, modest, simply wrapped, chosen with care rather than money they didn't have. Her stepsister's laugh cut through the room the moment she saw it. "Is that it? That's all you could manage?" Her husband smirked from the sofa. "I suppose that's what happens when you marry beneath yourself, Mary. You lose the ability to afford anything decent." "That's enough," Min-jae said, his voice low but firm. Ivana ignored him entirely, waving a hand in his direction. "Enough. You don't get to tell anyone in this house anything. You're nothing here. A guitar and a jacket, that's all you brought to this family." She reached for her glass of juice on the table, and without warning, poured it down the front of Mary's dress. The room went still. Mary stood frozen, juice dripping from the fabric, humiliation burning hot across her face. Min-jae's jaw tightened. He reached calmly for 2 glasses on the table, and without a word poured them both over Ivana back. Ivana gasped, spinning around, drenched and furious. "How dare you?" Her husband was on his feet in an instant, face flushed red with anger. "You ungrateful piece of trash. Who do you think gives you the right to put your hands on?" He never finished the sentence. Min-jae's hand moved fast, and the slap echoed through the room, sharp enough to silence every voice in it. "I've had enough of your rubbish," Min-jae said, his voice cold and even, each word deliberate. "Say one more word to either of us and I will break your legs myself. And don't think it is a threat, it's a promise." Her husband stumbled backward, cradling his face, too stunned to respond. Footsteps approached from the hallway, unhurried, heavy with the confidence of a man used to being obeyed the moment he entered a room. A figure stepped into the doorway, older, sharp-suited, the kind of presence that made even Mary's father straighten in his seat. Her stepsister's husband scrambled toward him, still holding his cheek. "Uncle, thank God, you're here. This man just struck me, in front of everyone. He needs to learn his place. He doesn't know who he's dealing with." "Who dares touch my nephew?" the man boomed, stepping further into the room, eyes scanning for the source of the disrespect, landing on the back of the man still standing near Mary. "Turn around," he demanded. "Face me." Min-jae turned. Mr. Zills froze. The color drained from his face so fast it seemed to take the air in the room with it. His hands, moments ago raised in righteous anger, began to tremble at his sides. He recognized the face. That was the Mafia boss himself, the most feared man in the underworld and wealthiest, most dangerous figure. Standing in front of him, in a modest living room, wearing a plain jacket with a guitar leaning against the wall behind him, was the man his nephew had just called trash. His nephew said, "Uncle, why are you terrified of him? You've to teach this waste where he belong." Instantly, his uncle landed him a slap. "You foolish boy, do you want to bring problem to me? Don't you know he's the Mafia king?" The words landed in the room, with freeze into the ears of everyone. Mary's father rose slowly from his chair, the blood draining from his own face as recognition dawned, piece by piece. Mary's stepsister's mocking smile collapsed into something closer to horror. Her stepmother, who moments ago had been so quick with cutting words, went utterly, completely silent. Mary turned to look at her husband, really look at him, seeing him now the way the rest of the room suddenly did, and felt something rise in her chest that wasn't fear. It was pride, warm and fierce and entirely hers. "You're—" her father started, the words barely making it past his lips. "Min-jae," he said simply, his voice as calm as it had been every single day on that bench. "The man your daughter chose to marry when she believed I had nothing at all." "You mean Min-jae, the Mafia king. But why did you disguised?" Her father was the first to move, dropping into his chair and then to the floor in front of Min-jae. "Forgive me," he said, voice cracking. "I didn't know. I judged wrong. I judged my own daughter wrong, and I am asking you, please forgive an old man's mistake." Ivana followed, knees hitting the floor beside him, her earlier confidence entirely gone. "I'm sorry, Mary," she said, and for the first time in years, her voice trembled with something that sounded real. "I didn't know, please, I didn't know." Her husband, still holding his stinging cheek, lowered himself last, head bowed toward the floor. "Please, I meant no disrespect. I didn't know who you were. I would never have." "You would have," Min-jae said quietly, cutting him off. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't need to know who I was to treat a person with basic decency. You only stopped because you were afraid of what I could do to you, not because you understood what you were doing to her." The silence stretched long enough that even Mr. Zills, a man who commanded rooms for a living, didn't dare fill it. Mary stepped forward and took Min-jae's hand in both of hers. "So you're actually a Mafia king," she said, looking around the room at every face that had once looked at her like she was worthless. "I married the only person who ever made me feel like I was enough exactly as I was." Min-jae looked down at her, and for the first time since the day at the mall, he let himself smile in front of people who weren't just her. "Get up," he said finally, addressing the room, his voice even and unhurried. "I didn't come into this house tonight for an apology. I came because she is my wife, and this is still her family, whatever has been done and said. What happens from here is her choice to make, not mine." Every eye in the room turned to Mary. She looked at her father, stepsister, tears cutting through carefully applied makeup. She looked at the husband who, only minutes ago, had called the most powerful man in the city trash. And she said nothing yet. She simply stood there, hand in Min-jae's, letting them wait the way she had waited for so many years to be seen. Mary looked at all of them for a long moment before she finally spoke. "I forgive you all," she said quietly. Her father's head lifted, something like relief breaking across his face. "Mary." "I said I forgive you," she continued, her voice steady. "Not because you deserve it, but a reason I don't want to carry what you did to me for the rest of my life." Her stepsister wiped at her face, opening her mouth to speak, but Mary held up a hand. "Let me finish," she said. "Forgiving you doesn't mean I want you in my life anymore. I don't want the assets back or inheritance. I strictly do not want anything with this family's name attached to it." Her father's face fell. "Mary, please, we can fix this. We can give you back everything." "I don't need it," Mary said, and for the first time in her life, her voice didn't shake in this house. "I have spent years in this family being told I was a wasted effort. I found peace outside these walls with a man you all mocked for having nothing. I don't need what's inside this house anymore. I have everything I need already." She looked at her stepsister last. "We don't have anything in common. We never really did, and I hope you find whatever it is you were looking for when you spent all those years trying to make me feel small." There was nothing left for them to say. Mary turned to Min-jae, who had watched the entire exchange without a word, his hand still resting steady around hers. "Take me home," she said. He nodded once, and together they walked out of the house that had never truly felt like one. The weeks that followed were quiet in a way that felt like healing rather than emptiness. Mary didn't reach out to her family, and they, humbled and unsure of their place in her life now, didn't push. She and Min-jae settled back into the small apartment they'd shared before the truth came out, though everything about it felt different now, lighter somehow, with nothing left hidden between them. "You didn't have to give it all up," Min-jae said, watching her from across their small kitchen table. "The inheritance and assets, I could have made sure you got every bit of it back if you wanted." "I know," Mary said. "That's exactly why I didn't want it. I didn't marry you to get something back from them. I married you because you were the first person who ever made me feel like I already had enough." Min-jae reached across the table and took her hand. "I have something to show you, something I should have shown you a long time ago." "What is it?"
I want to show you my real world.
"The real one, not the guitar and the jacket. My parents have been waiting to meet you for weeks." The following morning, Mary stood at the window of their small apartment when she heard it. The low rumble of engines approaching from down the street, growing louder, closer, until a line of black cars pulled up outside their building, polished to a shine that reflected the morning light. Min-jae stepped up beside her, dressed differently than she'd ever seen him. No worn jacket, no guitar slung across his back, just a tailored suit that fit him the way authority always had, even when he'd tried to hide it. "Ready?" he asked, offering his hand. Mary looked at the cars, at the men standing beside them in dark suits, waiting. "Ready," she said, taking his hand. The drive to the Empire estate took nearly an hour, the city slowly giving way to open roads, then iron gates, then grounds so vast Mary lost sight of where they ended. She had grown up in a wealthy house herself, but nothing had prepared her for this. "This is," she started, unable to finish the sentence. "Home," Min-jae said simply. Min-jae's parents were waiting in the main sitting room when Mary and Min-jae walked in. His mother seated with the composed elegance of a woman who had spent a lifetime in rooms like this. His father standing, watching them approach with careful, assessing eyes. Mary felt her heart pounding. This was the room that had turned away 12 women before her, women with wealth, with connections, even names that meant something in circles Mary had never been part of. Min-jae's mother rose first, crossing the room slowly, her eyes moving over Mary with quiet appraisal. "So," she said, "this is the woman." "Mother," Min-jae said, "this is Mary." Mary bowed slightly, unsure of the customs in a house like this, or anything except the steady presence of Min-jae's hand at her back. "I've heard," his mother said, "that you married my son when you believed he had nothing and an apartment barely big enough for 2 people. "Yes," Mary said, her voice steady despite the nerves. "And when your own family threatened to leave you with nothing for choosing him, you chose him anyway." His mother studied her for a long moment, and Mary braced herself for judgment, for the same disbelief she'd faced in her own family's living room. Instead, his mother's expression softened into something Mary hadn't expected, warmth, and beneath it, something like relief. "For years," his mother said, "women have walked into this house and looked at my son and seen an empire. You looked at him and saw a man with a guitar and you chose him, knowing you would lose everything." She turned to Min-jae's father. "This is the woman you have finally chosen." Min-jae's father crossed the room, and for the first time since they'd arrived, Mary saw something like a smile cross his face. "Welcome," he said simply, "to the Yongsu family." Mary felt something in her chest loosen. Min-jae's parents welcomed Mary the way they never had any woman before her, not as an addition to the family's holdings, but as the person their son had finally chosen for reasons that had nothing to do with money at all. Months that followed, Mary and Min-jae built their home together, and in it, for the first time in either of their lives, they were simply happy. Shout out to everyone watching, and remember, I still remain Charles, your writer and director. Hit the subscription button to stay with the family and keep getting amazing stories. Love you all.